Greetings, welcome to Mind Over Number. I am Karanda, spiritual coach, intuitive reader, and numerologist. And in this video, we're going to deep dive into what is known as Life Path 2 and Master Number 11. There are many things to go over in this video, and it's taken me a little while to get everything out of my head into this representation of what's going on in here. But hopefully, we can get through it, and I can make sure that everything is clarified. And let's just jump straight into it. Now, many people who think they are the Life Path 2 or the Life Path 11 may have some trouble understanding what exactly that means, because modern numerology has these rules of reduction and for master numbers, and these exceptions can often mistake someone for being on a path that they are not. Because of these reduction rules, we are not accounting for several steps of frequency. And this is the trouble I have when it comes to modern practices, and why I even became a numerologist in the first place, because I felt something was off and wrong with the numbering system. And so the point of this entire channel is to help expand everyone's awareness when it comes to tarot, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to numerology as a whole, because it's not just about numbers, it's about understanding the language of the universe and the entire construct that we live in. When we look at Life Path 2 and 11, they offer distinct experiences. And so while they may share relational energy, one is rooted in the physical realm, where the other one transcends into a higher octave of energy. And the 11 is the testing path. It challenges how effectively you can maintain and embody the energy of 2. By the end of this video, you will gain a clear insight into what fundamentally distinguishes Life Path 2 and Life Path 11. So if you walk these paths yourself or know someone who does, you will see how their energy and your energy shows up completely differently. Now, this is about our universe, right? The whole entire construct we live in, the earth, the moon, the stars, the sun, okay, all of it comes from 12. We live in a base 12 universe, and with each number, they hold their own core frequency and roles. And if you've watched the previous video that I did on how energy moves through these 12 spiritual frequencies, then you'll get a better grasp of this, and I'll post a link to that as well in this video. But essentially, 9 is the bridge to those compound or higher octaves of energy. And 13 is that reincarnation or rebirth or transformation energy. Once you get to 12, you then start a new cycle, a new path that carries all the experience from previous energies and takes it on into a new form. And on this screen here, I show that entire uh, 12 cycle process, and it's explained again in a previous video. Then we have all the octaves of energy, starting with the first octave, or what are known as the root numbers, 1 through 9. Now, we understand that everything cycles in 9. Those are the basic fundamentals of our awareness. It covers the physical, emotional, and mental planes of expression. And so when we look deeper into the layers, the octaves, the frequencies, because numbers aren't just values, they are sound, they're vibration. And as we dive deeper into those layers, in that second octave of frequencies, we have 10 through 18. And so behind 18, of course, is the number 9. Behind 17 is the number 6, or not 6, 8. Behind 16 is 7. Behind 15 is 6, because when you reduce those two frequencies into a singularity, you get a number 1 through 9. When looking at this, we see that both 2 and 11 stem from the same relational energy of 2. But 11 is a higher octave of 2. It's on the second octave of those root numbers. And so 11 embodies all of 2's magnetic cooperative traits and retains all the memory of those previous cycles of 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So even though we're looking at 11, we have to remember that it's not just 11. It's 10 plus 1. It's 9 plus 2. It's 8 plus 3. It is carrying a completion energy. And when we simply reduce 11 to 2, we're missing an entire level of experience behind that number. And because we live in a base 12 construct, once we get to that 12th octave, I highlighted the number 108. And if you ever dove anywhere into spirituality, you will recognize that 108 is a very sacred number when it comes to Buddhism, Hinduism, our lunar and solar calendars, the Fibonacci sequence, astrology, whether that's Western Vedic or Chinese, it all stems from 12. And once you cross that threshold into the 13th octave, we now enter that rebirth transformation energy, or what we know to be as reincarnation cycles. Understanding that energy can't be destroyed, right? It can't be created, but it changes forms. And so this simple list here will show you how the frequencies move between these different levels of awareness. And the basic, or the seed levels, are always 1 through 9. But as we expand and grow and raise our understanding of who we are, we then transform and create new paths that carry those core numbers, but we have now embodied or gained a new understanding of those numbers and transformed into these higher octaves of frequency. Now, this is where the confusion begins. Okay. Why Life Path 2 is misunderstood. Common numerology practices operate on this reduction system that simplifies everything into 1 through 9, with these exceptions made for specific master numbers like 11, 22, and 33. And this was done to make things, well, easier to understand, make it more marketable. Okay, I compare this a lot to what horoscopes are to astrology, because horoscopes simply cover the 12 sun positions or your star sign or those surface level interpretations, but horoscopes are only one set of the picture, which is why people don't necessarily resonate when they're reading their daily horoscope, because they're not in their sun sign energy. They can be taking on their moon position or their Venus position or their Mars position. So when we're looking at numbers, we're not just a single digit number, okay? We are not just a single digit number. just we are multidimensional. And when we compress everything down into a singularity, we miss those cycles of experience. And this pattern of 12 is what we already use on a daily basis. We see it in timekeeping and astrology, in our calendar, anyway, if you use the Gregorian calendar. Even if you use a separate calendar system, the calendar is rooted in astrology. We've mapped out the timing based on the lunar and or the solar cycles. And every single metaphysical practice, except for commercial numerology, uses or runs off this cycle of 12. And as a result, the numbers 2 and 11 have become intertwined, as they should be, because 2 really is behind everything. 2 is the number of duality. And so we'll get into that more. But the difference between what you may see in Western practices, even Vedic numerology, okay, Vedic numerology is a mix of different systems as well. And so it takes aspects of astrology. It looks at the planetary system, it looks at the 9 planets, right, to get its interpretations, but it's missing certain values that have been swept away over time. And so when we're looking at whatever you may find on the internet, it all runs off of base 10 calculations. And base 10 must reduce anything that is greater than 10 into a range of 1 through 9. And this simplifies the root meaning, overlooking those compound numbers, those multi digit numbers, and when it does this, it has to make exceptions. It has to then tell you that certain things are hidden, that you will now have partial numbers. And this is because things don't fit holistically or universally in base 10 values. It is very egocentric. And by egocentric, I mean it is very fear based. It is very centered on a linear way of thinking, right? It thinks past, present, future. That's what you're going to get in commercialized numerology. It's going to give you physical, mental, and emotional aspects, but it's going to miss out on the spiritual aspects because it is only making an exception for one part of the higher aspects available. And so, what I teach, what I study, what I have come to know works on a spiritual level is more harmonic or esoteric numerology practices. This is what Chaldean was based on. This is what Egyptian numerology is based on. This is part of what arithmetic, before it became numerology itself, was based on. It looks at that universal construct and preserves those compound numbers. And it acknowledges every single identical digit, 11 through 99, and honors the full expressions beyond just 1 through 9. And it gives you more spiritual base, more intuitive interpretations of those numbers, right? Because numbers are not just values, okay? They're not just a linear path. All these symbols are patterns and vibrations and frequencies that we expand and contract into all the time. And so when it comes to life path 2, this is where things can get misconstrued because we're just looking at surface level things and we're diving deeper beyond that. The nature of 2 itself. Okay, so 2 is the energy of attraction. This is why you won't find 2 by itself most of the time, because 2 is constantly trying to find balance. It is the number of polarity. It is the number of duality. It is trying to seek out connections. It is relational energy. So the rarity for 2 by itself as just a number is because it's always on the pursuit of balance and unity. And it only achieves stability when it is paired with a completed cycle, when it has that full vibration of 1 through 9 leading to a 10, which makes it whole. And when we get to the higher octaves, when we look at 11, 11 is that higher expression of 2. It's that complete cycle that has integrated the lessons learned from 2. It's in the same key, okay, because we're talking about sounds and frequencies, right? So you can think of it as being in the same key, but it's a different note. And so to be recognized as the life path of two, your full expression of your birth date should total 20. And it's not that life path twos don't exist, because I've heard this a lot in my own practice. Life path twos don't exist in the same way that all core numbers don't exist. One doesn't exist. There's no such thing as life path one, really, because the second you add any number to any other number, you get more than one. And so life path ones really should be a 10, but that's a completely different topic for another discussion. So let's return now to how life path 2 is expressed. The relational current of 2 manifest in many ways. These are distinct paths of 2, and they're not steps in a hierarchy. Okay, these are not linear, which is why I made this in a form of a wave, right? Sounds move in waves, they go wherever you need them to go. And 22 is the direct path of 2. It's a grounded life path anchored by that completion cycle. And despite sharing the same current of 2, 11 and 20 experience things quite differently. 22 grounds that relational energy because it's holding that experience and completion of the previous cycles before it. And so it has to learn through patience and timing and discernment brought in by that knowledge and awareness of everything that it's holding. Then 11 is the start of a new octave of energy. And when we move into the next flow or the next octave or relational current of 2, we get 29. And 29 is really the first compound energy that understands the cycles of 2 and the cycles of 11. And so now it's trying to maintain that higher vibration of 11 into the physical world without losing the integrity of that master frequency it carries. And as you can see here, when we have 2, if we add 9 to 11, which I also went over this into everybody's a life path 9 video, every single energy carries the vibration of 9 because 9 is that number of integration. And when we add 9 to 2, we get that higher octave of 11 because it's now carrying that completion cycle. If we add 9 to 11, we now have 20, which is now carrying that completion energy of 11. And so now it must integrate that 11 while on the path of 2. Then if you add another 9, we now enter another octave of energy, which is 29. And this goes on and on and on because the universe is always expanding. When we reduce energies prematurely or simplify things to just 11 2, then we miss out on these aspects that change the note being played. And so 4711 isn't the same as 2911 because the focus is now on that 7 working with the 4 as opposed to the 9 working with the 2. And so when we change the pitch, we change the way we approach that 2. And it's important to recognize these layers of frequencies. Otherwise, you may find that you don't actually resonate with that path because it's not truly the entire expression being displayed within your path. All right. So, how do we recognize whether or not you are a 22 or an 11 2? I have two people here. All right, we got Kanye West and J.Lo, also known as Jennifer Lopez, up here on the screen. I have their birth dates and I have broken down their birth dates into the method that I use to find the holistic or entire expression that is being displayed within the birth date. Now, there are many different ways to calculate the life path number, and I've gone over this before. And each one shows a different layer and experiences based on what we do to each individual part of the birth date. And in modern calculations, they will tell you to either reduce each component of the birth date, right? Birth month, birth day, birth year, until you get a single digit number for each component of the birth date, and then add those 3 numbers to get your life path number. And that is also known as the period cycle method because it's looking at the core frequency of your path across a long term cycle of expression. And so, what's being done when we reduce each individual part of the birth date is we're finding the root or the most simplified expression of your birth date when we do that. If you were to take on the Western approach, which is to reduce the year first and then leave master numbers 11, 22, and 33 as is, sometimes this can compress numbers prematurely because if we look at J.Lo's birth date here, okay, she was born July 24th. If we were to reduce 24 to a 6, we are now compressing all those cycles of experience behind that 24 into a singularity. And so now we're somewhat lowering her frequency by these reduction rules. Now I'm going to break down how to actually find the full expression being shown in your life path number if you are 20 or 11, or if you're any other life path and you just want to know what the heck I'm talking about. So, starting with Kanye's birthday, he was born June 8th, 1977. And when we add the full expression without any reductions, we add his birth year of 1977 plus the day he was born, which is the 8th, and the month he was born, which is the 6th month. And so when we add those three numbers, we get 1991 or 1991. Now I write 0 in front of 8 and 6 so that we understand that this is a single digit number. And although math, right, base 10 calculations will simply leave that off, and that's perfectly fine if you do, right? But I have specifically wrote that here to display the fact that even though we don't write 0, 0 is always there. Now, when we add the full expression and get 1991 or 1991, if we were to compress all those numbers, okay, if we were to reduce each individual digit, we would get, well, 20 or 2. But the problem with this is that it compresses the numbers to a set range of energies. And that range of numbers is 1 through 36. Because of our calendar, right, we express it in 4 digits, right? That's the highest way we can express things in our calendar, which is through 4 digits. If we were to add 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9, we would get 36. And simply by doing that, we have now limited our view of the energy. This method works when we're trying to find the core or the root octaves of energies, but it can create a false inflation or a misinformed calculation of what is actually being expressed in the energy, because it's not 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 1 being shown here. What's really going on is 1000, okay, plus 900 plus 90 plus 1. And if we know that a completed cycle of energy, okay, is 10, if we take 1000 divided by 10, well, that's 100 completed 1000 cycles. If we do 900 divided by 10, that's 90 completed hundreds. Then that 90 divided by 10 is 9 completed tens. And that 1 is the very beginning of those root numbers, of the octaves of energy that are shown in this little list here. Okay? Hopefully you're still with me. So if we understand that 1991 is not 1991, those cycles of experience being shown should not be compressed to that range of 1 through 36 or 1 through 9, because then we miss exactly how we're getting to that singularity. And so to find the full expression being shown here, what we should actually be doing is finding the lowest compound number of each of those cycles. And so the lowest compound found in 1,000 is going to be 100. The lowest compound in 90 or 900 is going to be 90. The lowest number or is 9 when it comes to 90, because when we get to 90, that's in the tens place. And so this is where it becomes important to pay attention to placement, because not every number in each position is being displayed accurately if we were to individualize each cycle. All right, so if I were to individualize 199 and 1, we're not getting that complete expression of 1991. And so the 100 is added to 90 plus 9 plus 1, which equals 200. And so 200 is really 20 completed cycles of expression, right? 200 divided by 10 equals 20. And that's how we discover that the vibration being shown in the full birth date for Kanye is 20/2. When we look at J.Lo's birthday, all right, she was born July 24th, 1969. So we add 1969 plus 24 plus 7, which equals 2000. And in many cases, what would be done here is that we would just simply call her a 2, eliminating all those zeros because of base 10 math. However, this is not just a 2. And I run into this problem a lot with 2000 babies, or depending on how you add up the numbers, right? If you're born in, some 60s or 70s, your full energy isn't being expressed because of how we treat zeros when it comes to numerology or even math, but mainly numerology, right? In math, you can knock off a 0 and be fine. But when you're talking about numerology, you're talking about energetic cycles, right? You're talking about patterns. And if we were to compress 2000 to 2, that then puts it into a range of 1 through 36, really, to get you to 1 through 9. But what's really going on is that it is 2000, which is 200 completed thousand cycles. And those zeros are not absent of space. The only 0 here that's really nothing is the 1 in the ones place. But when we look at the hundreds, it's actually holding space of every completed cycle before it. And those zeros are showing 99 completed cycles of the hundreds. And the full expression being shown should be calculated as 200 plus 99 plus, or 200 plus 99, which equals 299. And then to compress those cycles, holistically to make sure that we're counting the cycles of expression, we would then do the same thing with 299. So 299 is actually 200 plus 99, right? But then 200 is 20 completed cycles of 10. 200 divided by 10, which gives us 20. So then you add 20 to 99, because 99 is already in its lowest compound expression, and we get 119. Now I didn't write all that out, but we do the same thing again with 119. And so you could just take 100, lower that to 10, 10 plus 19, that's 29, 29. When we get to 29 now, we can't lower that anymore, because once we hit those double digits, we are now in a range of 0 through 99. And so that's when we can then simply add 9 plus 2, which equals 11. And so we can see, when we look at the full expression being shown by Jennifer's birth date, she may be mistaken for the life path of 2, but her full expression is actually showing she's on the path of 2911, which is in the same relational energy of 2, but her path is about integrating and maintaining that higher vibration of 11. So the difference between 22 and 11-2 is that 22 is showing a more grounded, completed, divinely supported vibration, because it is that 0 working with the 2. And 0 represents potential energy. And then 11 is a frequency that shows spiritual tests, because 11 can sometimes be trouble maintaining that higher expression, because 2 is always trying to seek out connections. And the only way 2 is going to be whole is if it has a completed cycle behind it, which is shown in the number 20. Now, another way to recognize this, because I'm also an intuitive reader, right? I use tarot to help show you how numbers show up. The number 2 in the tarot. Okay, these are, there's no coincidences here. Tarot falls into a spiritual frequency of 12, all right, because there's 78 cards in a tarot deck. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12 all equal 78. And the energy of 2 is shown by the High Priestess, right? In the High Priestess tarot card and the Rider-Waite, it shows those dual pillars, which symbolize a mirroring energy, right? It shows duality. And so when we look at the essence of two through the tarot, the high priestess is that keeper of inner wisdom. It is harmony and the in between spaces. It is the silence, it is the pause between realms. And so this represents the subtle, intuitive flow of collab collaboration, okay, collaboration and connection. It holds the capacity to create an environment for interaction, okay, for dialogue, for coming together with others. And so the high priestess is that energy that is listening intuitively and isn't trying to impose a solution, right? They are balancing those opposing forces and getting information from divine guidance from the subconscious realms into the physical conscious world that we live in. And so much like the high priestess, the number two, moves between those realms. And so the energy of two, again, is rare because it's always seeking balance, connection, unity, and understanding. When we are looking at the tarot for the energy of 11, that is shown by strength. And in the Rider-Waite tarot, okay, this is a more modern deck, but when we look at traditional tarot that's more numerically aligned, we will note that justice and strength get inverted. In the Mercedes Tarot, I went over this in my own personal name numerology, okay? So if you want to understand more about why these two were flipped, you can check out my own interpretation of my numbers through tarot video that's in the playlist. But the energy of 11 is actually strength, because strength is about mastery over the self. It is holding back your ego, your will, which is the energy of one, right? One is always about the self, with that of others. And 11 is that higher octave of two, but the two ones show the individual forces of creation. It shows the masculine and feminine energy. It shows the positive and negative. It shows the up and the down when we look at those two ones. And, and in those two ones, you now have two individuals working towards the same goal, or two opposite but complementary energies who are independent of each other, now being able to move forward and beyond those previous cycles. This is why 11 is seen as the challenging path, because they have to harness the strength, the durability to sustain this higher vibration, and making sure that they're aligned to that common purpose with themselves and with others. And so with strength, okay, if you're a master number 11, you have to lead, but not through brute force, okay? That's what strength is all about. It's about learning how to control yourself, right? Your own thoughts, your feelings, your own well being with that of others through patience, through a quiet power. You'll be able to take that courageous action towards your goals. And an important thing with 11 that I also wanted to note is that the space between every compound number is that pull of 2. Okay? Now, this is going to be important because I needed to do a whole different visual topic on that itself. Because the second you have a double digit number, the space between those numbers automatically creates a 2, right? It creates polarity, it creates duality. You now have two energies vibrating in 2. No matter what number it is. If it's 11, if it's 10, if it's 12, if it's 67, okay? Once you get into any number beyond the core lessons, beyond the numbers 1 through 9, we are now vibrating in 2. Because the world we live in is based off of duality. And we've moved beyond those core seated frequencies, right? Those basic lessons and understandings of 1 through 9. And so everybody is embodying the energy of 2. And 2 is intuition, right? Everybody is intuitive. Everybody is seeking partnerships and balance with themselves and others. And so no one is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. Everybody is holding on to those frequencies within themselves to some capacity. But what the life path number shows is the general outline of what you wanted to experience during this lifetime. When we get to life path 2, right, when your energy is stable and you've gone through all the experience and lessons of the octaves of energy 1 through 19, okay, we have 20. And the number 20 in the tarot is Judgment. And so to recognize whether or not you are on an 11 path or learning the lessons of 2, which is really 20, okay? Judgment energy, which is the call to awaken to a higher perspective. 20 is that first symbol of awareness, okay? When you look at Judgment in the tarot, it is an awakening energy, right? If you look further into the card, those 3 people on the card spell out the word lux or lux, Lux, and that itself means light. And light is a vibration or a word or energy that actually vibrates underneath 11. And 11 fluctuates into the 2 energy. But when we look at 20, it is a zero being led by two. And zero is a number that is potential energy. It is receptive, it is whole, it is the full cycles of completion. And two is that number of connection, cooperation, balance. And so that zero is raising up that two, right? Sometimes we say zero amplifies whatever number it's next to, but it's not really amplifying it, it's bringing it back down to its core energy. And so the path of 22 is going to be an experience, or it's going to teach you life lessons that relate to patience, discernment, right? Trying to see the truth or the false, and understanding that you need to trust in a higher purpose or higher power than yourself. It's about trusting in divine timing and seeing the bigger picture. And so much like Judgment, the path of 20 or 2 is pushing you to rise above distractions, to observe from that higher plane of awareness, and to evaluate all aspects and to take action when the moment is right. Not trying to rush, but trust that all will happen when it is meant to. And so it's about being a powerful influence, but understanding that you already hold the power within you. There's not much you have to grasp except that when it comes to 20, it can be a struggle because we're trying to constantly pick a path, right? The 2 is very, decision making. It could be indecisive at times. And so with 20, it really doesn't matter with what path you take. It's about trusting that the path you will take is going to lead you to something bigger than yourself. All right, that's what I got for you. When it comes to 22 and 11, all right, they represent two distinct manifestations of that same relational current. And so by grasping these paths, you'll then be able to identify them within yourself. And hopefully, the tarot can help you see the bigger picture, or how those energies may present themselves within your life experiences. There are way more 11s than there are 2s, but sometimes 11s don't fully resonate with 11 because they're actually carrying the frequency of 20. And many 11s can actually resonate with different cards of the tarot. And when it comes to 2911, for example, that is depicted by the Three of Wands. So if you would like to get a full report by me, okay, if you found any of this information valuable, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you can be alerted whenever I do more deep dives into numbers like this. And I also offer personal readings and do numerology chart reports that look at how the tarot shows up with your numerology chart. All you need to do is check out the description box below this video. The QR code that I put on the screen will direct you directly to the page with all my information. And make sure that you like the video if you learned anything. If you did not, I am sorry. Please forgive me. But thank you for joining me, and I love you. Toodles.